Welcome to the Diet Fiction Podcast, the show that tells you the truth about diet, nutrition, and health to educate, motivate, and inspire you to live a healthier, more fulfilling life. And here is your host, Michał Sawierski.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Diet Fiction Podcast. I'm your host, Michał Sawierski. I'm a documentary filmmaker, author, and wellness advocate. And in this show, we expose several misconceptions and myths about diet, health, and nutrition. Join me every week as I interview some of the most forward-thinking and disruptive health experts on the planet to help educate, motivate, and inspire you to live a healthier and more fulfilling life. Hi everyone, welcome to the Diet Fiction Podcast. How are you guys doing today? I hope everyone is doing great, and I'm super excited to be releasing another episode. As many of you know, I've been traveling a lot lately shooting a new film, but I'm finally back and getting the podcast up to speed again. Our guest in this episode is Conor Devine. Conor is someone that is truly amazing and inspirational. He's an Ironman ultra-endurance athlete, an author, a successful businessman, a single dad, and an activist. And he does all this while fighting a terrible debilitating condition called MS or Multiple Sclerosis. He's truly an inspiration, guys, and he motivates crowds whenever he speaks. If you suffer from MS or you know someone with MS, this episode will be extremely enlightening. But even if you don't, you will also find this episode full of useful information, inspiration, and filled with shocking facts about the pharmaceutical and food industries, as Conor reveals his experiences over the years of fighting MS. And he also shares how he has been able to keep it under control with his diet and lifestyle. And most importantly, how he's able to thrive despite having MS. What I love about his overall message is that it shows you that you can thrive and overcome difficulties no matter how bad things are in your life. And I think that applies to all of us. So just a quick plug for the Diet Fiction documentary, guys. If you haven't seen it yet, Diet Fiction is available on iTunes, Amazon, Google Play, Vudu, Vimeo On Demand, YouTube Films, and 25 other streaming platforms. It has been rated the #1 documentary on iTunes USA in the month of January. It is packed with shocking information about the weight loss and the diet industries, and it will empower you with some information that has never been shown before in a diet and health film. So if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. Leave us your feedback on Facebook or Instagram, and I'll leave all the links in the show notes on our website, dietfictionpodcast.com. Also, we just released a companion book for the film with Dr. Pam Popper. It is also called Diet Fiction, and it is available on Amazon on both Kindle and paperback. Now, one last thing before we get started. We get this question every single day, and it is, when is Diet Fiction going to be available on Netflix? And right now, we just don't know it yet. We'll be pitching them very soon, but if you guys would like to see Diet Fiction on Netflix, you can help us out by requesting it on their title request page. Just Google how to request a movie on Netflix, and that link will pop right up. And I will also leave it on the show notes below. Alright guys, but getting back to the podcast, I'm super excited to welcome our guest Conor Devine in this episode. I hope you guys enjoy it, so let's get started. Hey everyone, so we're here with Conor Devine. Conor, thank you so much for being in the podcast.
It's my pleasure, Michael. Thank you very much for the opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Absolutely. Conor, so tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, you're involved in so many things. You're an author, you're a businessman, you're an innovator, you're a whole food plant-based Ironman athlete, and you're an activist for when it comes to multiple sclerosis awareness, and I mean, truly, man, you're a true inspiration. But tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, look, I suppose I'm 41 years old at the moment, and I mean, my life to date has been quite a tale. Certainly over the last 10 years, things have been particularly interesting. But I'm a professional guy. I wear quite a number of hats. I'm a chartered surveyor by profession, so I built a pretty successful professional career in real estate and finance. I own my own business, so I'm really interested in business, working for myself, creating jobs and making a positive contribution to the economy. I live in Ireland. You can tell from my accent I'm also Irish. And I suppose my most important job is I'm a dad to two young kids. Liliana is now 8 years old and Conor is 6 years old. So, from a work perspective, Michael, I suppose some people might describe me as an entrepreneurial being. But for me personally, my life changed about 12 years ago whenever I got struck down with a mystery illness. And as we'll probably get into now in this conversation, everything about me changed 12 years ago in Mauritius. And over the last 12 years, I've pretty much been on a journey of discovery, trying to find out more about myself, who I am, how the illness was going to affect me, and then how my future would pan out over the years ahead. So it's been quite the journey. And at this point in time, I feel that I'm now at a point where, thankfully, I've been able to overcome the adversity that arrived at my door unexpectedly, and I'm just really, really excited and interested and enthused about the next 3 to 5 years, where hopefully I can share with people some of that journey, which might help other people in their own lives.
Absolutely, you have a book out, right, called Ironman. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so pretty much I published 2 books in the last 5 years. I never thought I would ever publish books. I mean, that's one of the interesting things about life and about my own journey and about everyone's life is one big story. But I wrote my first book in 2013. It's called Attitude is Everything, my MS story, MS standing for Multiple Sclerosis. And then about 18 months ago, I self-published and launched my second book, which is called Ironman Against All Odds. And really, in that book, I talk about, in 2006, Michael, I was diagnosed completely out of the blue with a neurological condition called multiple sclerosis. And MS is a very nasty condition, probably made famous by a certain Mr. Jack Osborne. I'm sure you know who Jack Osborne is. And yeah, it's a pretty debilitating condition. It typically hits people in their prime between the years of 20 and 40. And at that time, Michael, I was doing very well at work. I was very successful in real estate. My life was good, and all of a sudden I was wiped out. One day in Mauritius, my body just lost control. My arm went pins and needles and numb. I spent the next week in hospital. I was rushed home to Ireland. I spent the next 12 months extremely ill, off work. And then about 12 months after the initial onset of my symptoms, I was diagnosed with MS. So pretty much over the last 10 years, I've been coming to terms with that. I've been trying to deal with that and trying to fight that condition. And thankfully, since about 2010, I've been on this journey over the last 8 years. And every single year, Michael, I've sort of been able to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And I suppose to keep the recovery journey quite short, about 2.5 years ago, I decided to stop my medication and implement a plant-based diet. And pretty much over the last few years, I have been fighting my MS with food and exercise. And whenever I talk about exercise, not just exercising every day, but I've been using Ironman, the Ironman event, the Ironman Triathlon, to help me manage my MS, which probably to you and your listeners sounds a bit extreme and a bit crazy, but that's actually what happened. And out of that experience, I decided to get this journey down in a book. And I wrote this book called Ironman Against All Odds, which really sets out, I had this dream around about 2015. I looked around the world, Michael, and I couldn't find anybody who was living with MS who had completed an Ironman triathlon. And to those listeners who don't know what an Ironman is, it's pretty much the toughest endurance race that you might be able to do. It's a 2.4 mile swim. It's a 112 mile cycle, and then it's a marathon. And I couldn't really find anyone in the world, Michael, at that time who was living with MS and had achieved Ironman status. So I suppose I'm Irish. I always want a challenge, and there's a fighting spirit in me. And I trained for 6 months in 2015. I started in January, and I trained for 6 months. And I put in 6 different events, and the 6th event was in September in Mallorca in Spain, and that was the Ironman Triathlon. And thankfully, I finished that in one piece, and I achieved my Ironman status. I was surrounded by my children and my family, and it was an incredible time for me. So I wrapped all of that up, Michael, and I put it in a book, and I published the book last year, and thankfully that book is now out there. It's doing well. The reviews are quite good, and it's just part of my story. So I'm very, very pleased with it.
That's quite amazing. Well, what an achievement. I mean, Ironman, I can't even imagine. It's one of the toughest races on the planet, and you did that at the same time while fighting MS. So you win double there. I mean, that's quite amazing. Now, just to go back a little bit, what went through your mind when you got diagnosed? I mean, must have been quite a shock for you. What were some of the biggest fears that were going through your head when you got diagnosed, and how did you overcome those fears over time?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, but I think for me, you know, I talk about this to people, and I share my ideas around that type of question. And I think for the first time in my life, as I said to you, my life was going really well at the time. I was quite successful in business. I was a semi-professional athlete at the time. I was playing soccer semi-professionally in Ireland. 28 years old. I had my whole life in front of me, and then I was wiped out with this illness. And I think that was the first time whenever I had sort of hit my wall. And I think the interesting thing about life is that every single one of us, I mean, none of us are getting out of here alive. And at some point in time, something's going to happen in each of our lives, which is going to really challenge you. And I now know, looking back over the last 12 years, that was one of the first time in my life that I had a serious problem ahead of me. And at that time, whenever I was diagnosed, Michael, I became a Googleaholic. So I started to Google MS, and the information that I was getting about MS patients wasn't very positive. For example, typically 25% of people who are diagnosed with MS end up in a wheelchair within the first 10 years of the disease. It's a progressive illness, so you're expected to go downhill. The disease is expected to progress. And pretty much what happens to MS patients over a period of time, you lose control of your body. The interesting fact is that it can't really kill you. However, most people die with MS through suicide. So it's quite a difficult, nasty illness to arrive at your door. And for me personally, how I dealt with it those first 3 years, the truth is, and being honest with you, is I didn't deal with it too well. I struggled for the first 3 years. So from 2007 to 2010, I generally was in a very bad position in my life. I missed my Christmas dinners at home in my mum's house. I always go home to the family, and you know, it just was a very depressing, dark time in my life. And I think when things changed for me, what happened actually was, and some of your listeners might know of this guy, but I found about 36 months into my illness, when I was quite down and quite low, I came across a guy called Montel Williams. I don't know, Michael, if you've ever heard of Montel Williams, and he's in New York.
Actually, no, but I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah. So Montel Williams he's quite a very famous, well-known American television host. He's got his own entertainment company. He's a former Navy SEAL, and around about 2010, I came across this guy online, and I couldn't believe it, because at that time, Michael, I had lost all hope. And anyone who's suffering with an illness, or they've come up against some form of adversity in their life, they're struggling and they're always looking for hope. And Montel Williams, this guy was suffering from MS, yet he had a successful business. He was training every day, he was writing books, and he was doing all of the things that I thought you couldn't do. And what that did for me, once I found Montel, I started to find other people like Mark Pollock, like Susan Sly, and other people all around the world who, despite illness and despite living with maybe MS or other things, they still were able to go on and realise the potential and to have a good life. And the impact that had on me 36 months into my illness was life-changing, because it was like a light switch went on in my head. I just said to myself, if Montel Williams can turn his life around, live with this condition, and do everything that he's doing, why can't I? And that was really the turning point, and that was the point in my life when I said, look, I'm going to have a go at this. I'm going to start this fight back against my illness.
That's incredible. I think some authors talk about surrounding yourself with mentors, whether physical people or people in books or podcasts or courses. And I think that's what you did. You surrounded yourself with people that inspired you, with mentors that help you get through this difficult phase in your life, and sort of shift your way of thinking and your approach towards this problem, right?
I think so, and I mean, I would agree with Gary Vaynerchuk at the minute. I think it's the best time to be alive. There's a lot of negativity going on in the world right now in politics and economics and global situations and issues that are going on. That's very unsettling. But with the time that we live in right now, with the internet, me and you talking across the Atlantic, you know, the amount of people out there, Michael, who can inspire you and who can change your life is absolutely incredible. And one of the messages that has to come out of my story is you have to go look for these people. You have to go find people. I know you've spoke to and interviewed people like Rich Roll and people like Michael Greger and Colin Campbell and guys like that. And the nice thing about living at the moment is there's so many inspirational, good, authentic people out there. And for me personally, it was meeting them people. It was reading about them people. It was opening up my mind to the possibility that I could beat this condition, that I could have a business, that I could have a family, that I could share a story, I could share a positive story. All of those things, like over the last 8 years, I mean, the person that you're talking to this evening is a completely different person to the one that was first diagnosed with MS 12 years ago. And that's been a pretty incredible transformation. But what I would say about that, Michael, is I've put in the work. You know, I've put in a lot of effort into making the person that is talking to you today. There's been a lot of time has went into this process.
So do you think that people should try to focus on the positive even when they're going through tough times? Because that's a difficult thing. I mean, you're going through something really negative, some real challenge in your life, and then how can people focus on the positive side? How can they find that strength? What is your advice when it comes to that?
So my advice, I mean, there's a little guy called Nick Vucevic. I don't know if you've ever come across Nick Vucevic. I'm not sure.
No, I haven't.
Nick Vucevic he's a really interesting guy. He was born with no arms and no legs, and I came across Nick Vucevic stuff about 10 years ago, and this guy's out. He's selling out arenas. There's maybe 30,000-40,000 people come to hear him speak, and like the way I sort of answer that type of question is there is so much adversity. Life is going to present all sorts of trouble and adversity to each and every one of us. But there are so many people. I mean, I'm drawn to people who have adversity in their own lives. And what I try and do, I try and find people, for example, if you're diagnosed with MS like I was, I try to find people who had a similar diagnosis, and then I try to find, well, how are they dealing with this? So I've given you an example of this guy, Montel Williams. You know, he was dealing with this. He was exercising. He created a business. I studied him. So I go look for people who have similar challenges, Michael. And I think that's not a bad way to go about overcoming any kind of adversity in life, is to go and find people who have overcome similar problems. Go, if you can't meet them in person, go read about them. Go online, go to YouTube. I mean, there's so much information out there now. There's so much information. So that's one way, I think. I think that's the easiest way now to deal with stuff.
That's interesting, because you're sort of modeling other people's successes, and I mean that's something that applies to so many things. I mean, you can try to model successful people not only in business and marketing, but also when it comes to health, right?
Yeah, it's the same stuff. I mean, I think people in life at the moment overcomplicate things, and I have so many different people from all walks of life that inspire me, and Will Smith, the actor, inspires me, and one of the things he says is don't reinvent the wheel. I mean, I get diagnosed with a very nasty illness, but I mean, there's been millions of people who have been diagnosed with similar illnesses. So how have they overcame that? I mean, the thing about life is that it's full of ups and downs, but the world that we're living in at the minute, there's that much information out there. There's so many resources. I think it starts, Michael, to be honest, if you were to speak to anyone who's struggling at the moment in anything in life, I think you do have to find the courage to ask for help. And I think the start of any recovery process starts with that, asking for help. You have to have the strength. The sad thing is that some people don't have the strength to ask for help. I was very fortunate that I had the spirit to go and find help and ask for help. And I think that was the turning point for me, because for 3 years I didn't ask for help.
And what inspired you to keep going?
I think I had no choice. I think I had no choice to keep going. I had this burning desire. I've always been very competitive from a young boy. I grew up in an environment of sport. I grew up in a team environment. I always wanted to win. I mean, I'm from a part of the world where, I don't know, everyone knows about the Fighting Irish, but we're quite a resilient nation, Michael, and giving up for me was never an option. No matter how low I was, I spent many a night crying myself to sleep. Just to give your listeners a sense, I mean, the first 3 years of my illness, I struggled to walk. I struggled to go and do the shopping. I had very bad vertigo and balance problems. I had about 25 different symptoms. There's over 50 different symptoms with people who live with MS. So it was quite a challenging time. But there was something within me, Michael, that I just had this inner desire, this desire to get better. I had this desire to try and overcome this, but I just couldn't work it out. I couldn't work out at that time how I was going to do it. And it was really only whenever I came across the work of Montel that he gave me the hope and the desire and the encouragement to tackle this thing, and the tools, more importantly. So, you know, I'm not sure what the one thing was, but it certainly was something. I think the environment I grew up from, I was a young boy, was one of being competitive and never giving up, and the tools that I learned on the playground with my friends as a young boy.
Interesting. So during your journey, you stumbled upon information about a whole food plant-based diet. Can you take us a little bit through that process? How did you start implementing this lifestyle into your life, and what were some of the benefits that you experienced from going plant-based?
Yeah, so pretty much from I was diagnosed with this illness, I pretty much started to study the condition. I became a pupil of the condition. I read every book I could find. I studied doctors. I studied all kinds of research. I was just trying to figure out. I think it was one of the first times that I understood that, you know, there was nobody who was going to fix me. The only person that was going to fix me or help me was myself. And once I think once you can only understand what I'm saying once you're sort of diagnosed with something. It's a very lonely, vulnerable position to be in once you're living every single second with an illness. So that put me on a journey of discovery, and I was very open-minded on how that might pan out. I injected a disease-modifying drug pretty much 12 months from diagnosis. So for 9 years, I injected a drug which was designed in nature to prevent relapses, but it wasn't designed to repair my physiology. So for 9 years, I was taking conventional medication. And about 2.5, 3 years ago, a friend of mine sent me a film, which you'll be familiar with, called Forks Over Knives. Mm-hmm. And I think it was really watching the work of Dr. Campbell and Dr. Esselden and watching that film, which really opened my mind to the possibility and the impact that going plant-based, or even thinking about going plant-based, might have on my own health. And of course, that film then opened the gateways for me to look for other resources, of which I came across your movie, the Food Choices documentary, which I have to tell you made an incredible impact on me, and you know that anyway because we've been in touch about that, which led me on to What the Health, Cowspiracy, and there's about 5 or 6 different movies which for me made all so much sense. And going right back to what our grandparents used to say, I don't know if your grandparents saying this, but keep it simple. You know, eat your fruit and your veg, and all of this stuff. Once you strip it all back, was common sense. And whenever I started sort of looking at the science, and then I started finding doctors like Dr. Swank, who had carried out various researches which had been buried, various studies which had been buried actually, and others like Dr. George Jelnick, who's an Australian neurologist who's come up with an Overcoming MS program, and a lot of these guys, Michael, were all saying the same thing. And it all really came back to a plant-based whole food diet. And I think the game changer for me was whenever I worked out and found the research by Dr. Swank, particularly in relation to MS patients, that those MS patients who limit their intake of saturated fat to 15 milligrams per day tend to have better outcomes. That was me sold on a plant-based lifestyle. So pretty much what has happened in the last 2.5 years. I'm a walking trial, so I decided against the advice of my neurologist, of my GP, of my medical team, to stop the conventional medication, which was an injection every night into my sort of buttocks area, and I replaced that with a fully whole food plant-based diet along with daily exercise. And I think what I can say is it's been fascinating over the 2.5 years, but thankfully the improvement in my health since I have done that over the last 2.5 years has been incredible, to the point where I have been able to complete 7 different Ironman Triathlon races. I'm running my own business. As you know, I'm quite a busy family man, so I still have intermittent MS symptoms, Michael, but my health, talking to you this evening in 2018, is a hell of a lot better than 12, 13, 14, 15.
That's incredible. So you said that one of the main aspects or benefits from the diet, from the whole food plant-based diet, was getting your saturated fat intake limited, right? So reducing the amount of saturated fat that you consumed. And from the research that you've done, do you see a connection between MS and intakes of high amounts of saturated fat?
So I think as a patient, it's very hard to quantify. Like, whenever you're living this every day, whenever you're waking up in the morning and you change your diet, it's very, very hard to quantify the difference in lifestyle changes, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm very careful about this as well, because you can oversell anything. And there's a lot of people talking about paleo at the moment, and keto is very, very cool to be at the moment, and plant-based is right up there. I'm talking from a patient's perspective, and I can only tell you my experiences, but one of the obvious things that happened to me, probably within 6 weeks of me pivoting to a whole food plant-based diet, was the pressure and the stress had left my head, and the absolute mental clarity that I had in my brain, Michael. I mean, I became, a lot of MS patients talk about brain fog, and I found that as the months started to pass, as I was just putting good, nutritious food, which was complementary to brain health, into my system, I just found my health was slowly getting better. My symptoms were decreasing. I had more energy. I was in better form. A lot of the stuff that you would associate with plant-based eating in general, forgetting about the MS, I was now experiencing, right? And I have to say that one of the doctors, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. Terry Walls. So Dr. Terry Walls is an American neurologist. She's a lady doctor, and I mean she's sort of lighting up the American television stations over the last 2 years. But she was a neurologist who got MS, and she was on all forms of medication. Her MS was progressing very, very quickly. She was in a chair, and she decided to stop all form of medication, and she started to treat her condition with food which was complementary to brain health. And over the next 18 months, her decline stopped and her health improved. And the Dr. Terry Walls story is now quite famous. I mean, she's got a TEDx talk up there called Minding Your Mitochondria. So she was someone, Michael, who was part of the whole group of influencers, which was enough reason for me to go on the plant-based diet. And thankfully, I'm able to confirm that I'm experiencing a lot of what all these other people are experiencing on a plant-based lifestyle.
Fascinating. And one thing that I find interesting, because I know some other people that struggle with MS, and a lot of them are not plant-based, but we're seeing more and more doctors recommending that MS patients get off dairy. Was that something that was recommended to you as well?
Yeah, so it was I actually stopped dairy products before I went fully plant-based, because there actually is research out there that those MS patients who continue to take dairy products tend to have worse outcomes. There's proteins in cow's milk that can, there's research out there, Michael, that by drinking cow's milk and dairy, it has a negative impact on MS patients. So that research and that kind of narrative is out there for people to check online. So I found that out actually a few years ago. So dairy was the first to go for me. And I know a lot of people who love their cheese, they love their dairy products, but for me it was a no-brainer. I think, to be honest, Michael, it's a lot easier to change onto a form of lifestyle whenever you're living with some form of illness. And I mean, my message in general is it took me to get MS, it took me to get very ill and become very ill to change to a plant-based lifestyle. And what I say to people is, don't be like me. Don't wait till you're sick. You can change today. You know, that's the very heart of my message.
Interesting. So you went off dairy before you went plant-based, but then so after you went plant-based, you experienced even a bigger improvement than when you were just off dairy, right?
Yeah. So once I went fully plant-based, and I mean, going plant-based, I mean, it's an interesting lifestyle sort of change, and I think it's a lot easier as well, because I actually personally I like to cook. I think if you like to cook, it's a lot easier, and I found after month 1, month 2, I found absolute mental clarity in my head, my own form. I mean, I just found that I was in better form. I was probably better to be around, and I think in the first 6 months, the benefits which would include having a lot more energy. I mean, I'm a young man. I exercise every day. I've got young children. I've got my own business. I mean, I need to be on it all the time. So whenever you're living with an illness and you're not feeling great all the time, it's a lot harder. So I certainly felt over the last 2.5 years, there's been a huge improvement in my overall energy levels, Michael, alongside a reduction in my day-to-day symptoms.
And Conor, why do you think there aren't more doctors talking about this? I mean, there are some within the plant-based world, but overall, why aren't more doctors talking about treating MS with food and lifestyle changes?
Well, I think the reason for that, if you look at, I think this has been covered quite a bit in a lot of the films that I mentioned, and I think you personally have interviewed lots of people around this. The big problem in medicine today, there's a conflict of interest in the whole medicine community between the influence that Big Pharma has and the connection that Big Pharma has with medicine and with our doctors and our medical doctors. And I mean, I think that is a major problem in MS. It's a major problem in a lot of the other illnesses and conditions that are out there. And for me personally, like, I have spoken at a number of international conferences for a pharmaceutical company, which I won't name, but they produce a form of medication for MS patients. And the last time I spoke at that conference, Michael, was 2014 in Brussels. And I challenged the room. I asked the room, which was full of Big Pharma people, doctors, medical doctors, and I asked them why there was a disconnect between the conventional approach to deal with MS and the alternative approach to deal with MS. Because I personally think there's room for both. I think there's a room for conventional medicine. I think there's a room for the alternative approach as well. And it's something I feel quite passionate about, but I personally feel that it's all driven by money. And it's quite sad, and us patients are caught in the middle. It's very unfortunate. And, that's why I think I touched on this about 10 minutes ago. It was only whenever I found out that nobody else was going to fix me as a patient, my GP, my neurologist, nobody was going to fix me. I had to fix myself. And that meant that I had to go on this journey of research, of self-discovery, to figure this all out myself. And Michael, to be honest, in this day and age, that shouldn't happen. So I just think with things that people like yourself, the contributions that people like yourself are making to this conversation, people like Matt Embry, who has just brought out a film in the last 6 months called The Living Proof. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I haven't seen that yet, no.
Matt Embry won an award at the Montreal Film Festival. His film is now going global. I think it's on Amazon Prime. And they are people like yourselves are shining a light on this problem at the moment. The absolute conflict of interest between Big Pharma and patients like me. So I think that's a major issue. I think it's going to be it's been a major issue for the last 50 years. I think it's going to be a major problem over the next 50 years. But all we can do is try and educate and point people and shine lights on things which can help people to discover and find out their own path.
Well, I commend you for being so brave to speak about this issue in that conference, as you mentioned. I mean, I can only imagine the doctors and the big pharma representatives' faces when they heard you talking. That must have been quite a shocker for them. But I think you bring a good point also.
Just to let you know on that, I spoke at different conferences around Europe in 2011, 12, 13 and 14. And I sort of knew, Michael, I'm just sharing this with you, but that the 2014 talk was going to be my last talk at this kind of setup. And that's why I wanted to challenge the people in the room, because they were very influential in the European pharma discussion. And isn't it a coincidence that they haven't asked me back?
Yeah, no, I think it's pretty obvious why.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you bring in a good point that it's not about getting rid of conventional medicine. I mean, I think there's definitely room for conventional medicine, for improvements in conventional medicine, but I think that the establishment needs to become more open to a more holistic approach, incorporating more diet and lifestyle changes and how that affects people's health, and not just be about drugs all the time and tackling the symptoms but not the root cause of the disease. So I think that shift in paradigm needs to occur sooner or later, and I think we're seeing it little by little. We see more and more doctors that are interested in this type of approach, but unfortunately that's still not something that's been taught in medical schools a lot, and we still have a long way to go. But I think thanks to a lot of the doctors out there and people that like yourself who are speaking up and inspiring others through your results, I think we'll slowly but steadily will continue seeing positive change happening.
Yeah, well, I think there's the crux of the matter is in what I'm just about to say, and I think this is really important. But I'm not anti-medicine. I'm not anti-pharma as such. But I think medication and medicine, by its very design, it's designed to manage disease, right? Mm-hmm. I think very badly, not induce health. And if you think about that, what I've just said, medication by its very nature is designed to manage disease, not induce health. And it was only, Michael, whenever that penny dropped and what I've just said to you, like I realized after 9 years that this medication that I was taking is not repairing my body's physiology. It's not making me stronger. It's not improving my brain health. It's designed to maybe stop relapses. And that's the myth in the MS community that I was finding out for myself. And whenever that penny dropped with me, Michael, I said, well, how am I actually going to repair my body's physiology? Right, so I can do that through nutrition, through exercise, through positive mindset, through lifestyle. So it took me 9 years, and I would, I suppose, sum myself up as someone who's of average intelligence, who's investigative. But why did it take me so long to work that out? So, that's the key thing for me. And if you look at cancer, the billions of pounds that's gone into cancer, they're pretty much no further on. I think medicine has I think it's sort of pain relief. I think with morphine and stuff, it certainly can deal with pain. But in terms of managing disease, Michael, I think there's a long, long road ahead for any form of medication. And that's where, I think this is improving over the last 2 to 3 years. It's inspiring to see Dr. Terry Walls now getting millions of dollars invested into the scientific trials around the impact that nutrition can have in people who have got neurological problems. It's going a long road, but I think what I just said to you is very, very important. The fact that medication is designed to manage disease and not induce health. It's worth thinking about.
Absolutely. And Conor, what would you say to people suffering from MS that are not aware about this link with food. What do you usually tell people that find themselves in a similar position that you were years ago?
So what I basically say to anyone is to, number one is to keep your mind open to the possibility that everything can improve. I think nothing is permanent, so you will have good days and bad days. If you think about that comment, it's quite a sentence. Nothing is permanent. My dad said to me, Michael, about 12 years ago when I was quite bad, he says, look, be patient, things will work out, things will improve. And it's easier said than done, but nothing is permanent. The highs in life, they don't last forever. The lows don't last forever. So if you're an MS patient or you're going through some form of adversity in your life at the moment, nothing is permanent. Things can improve. And if you open your mind to that possibility that things can improve, and then you accept that nothing is permanent, there's a third thing that you need to do, and that's taking massive action. And part of the action that you need to take is you need to go and find people like me and others who have reversed or they have overcame whatever form of adversity has come into their life. And the bottom line is, in this day and age, as Gary Vaynerchuk says, it's the best time to be alive. There's millions of people all around the world today who are overcoming all kinds of adversity every single day. And if you can find those people, Michael, that will certainly help you on your journey to recovery. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Absolutely. That's incredible words of wisdom and inspiration. Thank you for that. And Conor, what's next for you? What do you have going on? And how can we support and promote your work?
Yeah, well, look, what I've been doing this year, 2018, I do my goals every December, and this year's working out actually to plan. I plan to compete in 2 Ironman races the first 6 months of 2018, and I completed them the first 6 months as I had planned to. And over the sort of back 6 months, so now I'm back studying again. I'm reading 2 books a month, and I'm out talking. I'm doing some talks in schools. I'm quite passionate, Michael, about sharing my story of recovery with young people. I plan to speak to over 1,000 young people between now and Christmas. So I've got 10 weeks. I spoke to about 400 people last week in Ireland, and I plan to speak to another 600 people over the next few weeks to just share an idea with the younger people, the younger generation, that you're going to get disappointments in life and that there is ways to overcome that. So for me, I'm quite busy in my real estate and funding business, and my plan is to exit that business in the next 24 months. And over the next 36 months, I really want to do a lot more of this kind of thing. I've done a number of podcasts in the last number of months. I want to do some documentaries. We've talked about some film work. I'm just really curious, and I'm really excited about sharing a positive story. And the time that we're living in now, there's no better time, Michael. I mean, there's a real need and a desire and demand for this kind of discussion. I think people need to hear this. I think people need hope. And if I can be a beacon and share a message of hope, well, that's something that I want to do.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for all your inspiration, for everything that you're doing. I really appreciate it. And we'll definitely include links in the description to your books, your website, and your work. Conor, thank you so much for being in the podcast. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on. Really appreciate it.